Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first chance to see Budapest, and it's just an honor to be here, so thank you so much. I'm going to start today and talk about standing on the shoulders of testing giants. So to kind of set the stage, I want to talk to you a little bit about me. So I've been in software testing for over 15 years. And it wasn't actually until about 5 years ago that I learned that there was this thing called software conferences. So for a good 10 years, I was on my own, learning by going to books, learning on job experience, everything like that. So you can only imagine my surprise when I first go to a conference and I feel like this. So if those of you familiar with the Where's Waldo games, the goal is to find the guy with the red and white striped hat. And I really kind of felt lost in this crowd. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I knew there were some really cool people around me. So for those of you who have been trying to see, there's Waldo. So there we go. I get to my first conference, and I start going to these presentations, and I'm like, these people are amazing. They were so inspirational, and they were so insightful, and I learned that, wow, they have a lot of great ideas, and I actually started to feel a little small in comparison to them. But that's okay. I really wanted to take advantage of their learning and their heights. So how can I stand on their shoulders to be a better software tester? Then I started going online, and I learned there are more conferences out there, and there are more trainings out there, but how do I really figure out who to listen to and which direction to go? And I learned that I had to kind of look at things from my business perspective and my own challenges to figure out which giants are out there. There are a lot of giants solving similar problems to me, so how can I leverage their experience to really skyrocket my career and improve my testing? So I'm going to present a little bit of a case of what I did with Carnival Corporation. And I worked on a device called the Ocean Medallion. So you guys can understand, I wasn't steering cruise ships. I was working on some pretty fun stuff. Awesome, right? So basically, I was working on an IoT device that also had a mobile application with it. It had a website, which was our property management system, because you saw we had wireless entry into our, keyless entry into our staterooms, as well as these large interactive portals. Now I was doing all of this testing on a big metal ship in the middle of the ocean, right? Sounds kind of exciting, but it's also very challenging because you have satellite connectivity, you have interference with water, you have interference with a big metal ship, and you have tons of guests doing a lot of things. So I was brought into Carnival Corporation. I came into Carnival Corporation because they wanted to look at their testing and how they could do testing better. And when I walked in, they had an end-to-end test team. And the end-to-end test team was doing the best that they could do because leadership really thought that quality meant the number of test cases. So they would have these regular meetings where they would go through and show their pass-fail ratios and the number of test cases that they had produced that week. Then they had 2-week sprints, and at the end of these 2-week sprints, they would have a go, no-go call, and it was half kind of in person, some people on the phone, some people over video chat, and they were anywhere from 3 to 4 hours long. where they would talk about every single test case that they had written, all the different defects that they had gone through, and then at the end, the testers were told, well, can we release or not? You have to answer this. You have to give us the go or no-go. These testers felt really siloed and segregated because they were their own little end-to-end test team that really kind of did their thing and only met with the developers when they were ready for this go, no-go call. There was also no written or communicated requirements. Now, this is kind of the fun thing and the challenge of working on innovative software and innovative devices is you get to work with a lot of very fun, creative people who may not necessarily know how to write down requirements or communicate them. It's kind of like, I want this thing to do the thing. So as a tester, I had to figure out and almost reverse engineer and learn how to figure out what my requirements even were. And the biggest problem that they had was leadership was really under this mentality of you have to automate all the things. Automation is going to save us all, automate all the things so we can release faster. So this was the old test reporting. And this is literally what they would give. They would give a list of all of the defects, pass-fail ratios, and a list of the test cases that were in that suite. Not very informative, didn't really help me understand what was really being tested. So the first thing I challenged was, okay, you brought me in to do quality. You do know that quality is not testing, and testing isn't test cases, right? So I actually had to work with them to rethink what the word quality meant, to make sure that we were all on the same terminology and we had an understanding of what they valued. So what is quality? And I looked it up, and this is the technical definition, or this is one of the definitions that I got for quality. And this is actually what I showed them. I said, when you look at even the basic definition of the word quality, testing isn't in there. So once they understood that we had a quality problem, they said, great, now how can you help us? And I said, okay, well, let's look at this. Let's look at our end-to-end testers as quality as a service. And as Philip used yesterday, help me help you. So I had to figure out, and I got this bit of wisdom from testing giant Rob Sabrin. And he has an article that goes through how to set up a quality as a service organization. And it's kind of looking at, I said, you know what, this would be a really good model for us to have because we are kind of siloed. How can I help overall general quality? So I went around and I asked all of my leaders. I said, what does quality mean to you? What metrics are you currently using? What tools do you currently use? And I asked our developers and our testers, is there anything that would make your life easier that you just don't have time for? And the biggest one was, how can I help? I didn't want to come in as a new leader and be like, I am the expert, I know how to do all of the things, this is how it needs to be done. These are people who have been testing this for 2 to 3 years. I wanted to leverage their expertise to say, how can I help you? Where are your pain points? How do I get to that? There we go. So we looked at it, and one of the things that we decided to do was mob test design. So if you've heard of mob testing or mob programming, we took this mob testing and introduction and experience report, and we said, how can we apply this to doing our test design? Because one of the things that they felt was really siloed, and they were forced to just focus on test cases and not really test the product. So I said, let's have this mob test design. Let's, as a group, come together, leverage each other's knowledge and experience to really look at how does testing look for testing a cruise ship and these experiences on cruise ships. And then we applied the idea of mind mapping. So I took a mind mapping course from Jennifer Bonine, and I really learned about how I can write a mind map of my test strategy. So we had all these great ideas, mob testing, mind mapping, but we needed to have some sort of mission for this. So our mission was to really look at how we can test these, and I wanted to have some guide rails. So I looked at rapid software testing and some of the ways that we could break down the product. So I could have a little bit, handle the chaos a little bit, herd the cats into a general direction. So we looked at all of this, And what we did is we came up with test ideas. So we broke it down into all the different, we used San Francisco Depot, and we broke it down, and we came up with test ideas. We mind mapped it out, test ideas, and we put our test ideas as tasks in Jira. Now, this specific Jira project did not allow for anything other than tasks. We did not put defects in there, we didn't put user stories in there, anything. It was just all of the test ideas that we had, so we weren't writing them down on sticky notes and losing them. Sticky notes work, I love sticky notes, but sometimes they get lost or you forget about them, things like this. So this was a way for us to track that. Then we used a tool called Test Case Manager, QTest Manager. We pulled those in as our requirements, and we built test suites off of these test ideas. They were checklists based off of these text ideas. And then we looked at our test reporting. And we said, okay, that wasn't providing me a lot of information. That was too much information. What I want to do is I want to have a regular report. We're not going to wait just till the end of 2 weeks. Every single day on Confluence, I want us to set up a test report. And we broke this up by using, it was a Google Sheet that we imported into Confluence, and it just was very simple. This was our end-to-end test suite. These are the features. This is blocked. This is, I put a lot of effort into the testing of this, things like that. So I'm going to run through this really quick. So the first one was effort. So the question we asked was how much time or how much depth of testing that I did. And you notice it's red, green, yellow. Very visual, very easy for people to see at a glance. Then we looked at coverage, and we said, okay, did I cover a lot of this feature? Did I cover a little bit of this feature? How well is it tested? How in-depth did I go? And then I had a basic, this is a gut check. What are my oracles? What are my gut checks? How do I feel about the quality of this? Do I know if there's any showstoppers in here? Did I kind of cover it, but not really? And then what we did is we took our actual mind map where we broke it out into features and all of our test ideas, and we added color coding to it. So we actually used Lucid Chart, and as we tested things and as we felt increased coverage and quality, things like that, our colors would change. So leadership had a quick view, real-time view, really, of all the testing that we were doing, and it was simple. It cut our meetings down from 4 hours to 20 to 30 minutes at most. And then we looked at our test automation, and I said, okay, this is great, but you need to have a strategy. How do we figure out what we're going to test and what makes sense to test? And I leveraged Angie Jones, who has a great automation strategy, and she has a worksheet of herself where it goes through customer risk and value of test, cost efficiency, history. And it was really interesting to watch because if you see in that first column, it's gut feeling. There's a lot of times where my test automation engineers were like, oh, this would take 2 seconds to automate. I'm just going to automate that. But then when you really looked at it, it was taking us forever to maintain it because that was an extremely brittle part of the software. So it kind of gives you just a guideline, guardrail for should I be automating this or shouldn't I be automating it? And you can use it as, this is our strategy. I used it as a tool for communication. So if I had a question for something, if I thought we should automate it, because sometimes just going through a lot of these exercises caused communication, allowed us to really talk more about what we were doing. So in the end, we had happier testers, happier leadership, and happier developers. We broke down those silos by doing the mob test design, by having these worksheets, by having real-time feedback to those developers. We increased communication. My test team no longer felt siloed. The best compliment of my career ever came out of this project when I had a tester come back up to me and said, I am happy because I actually get to use my brain. That's impactful. He no longer felt like he had to sit there and click through step by step test cases. He was a part of improving that quality. And I had leadership that was extremely happy because they didn't have to sit in 4-hour meetings. They could make quick calls based on real-time mind maps that were colored out, visual for them to easily pick up and run with. So I can't take credit for this, nor do I want to take credit for this. So I want to give a shout out to a lot of the giants that helped me in this project and going forward. So thank you. And I continue to learn from each and every one of you. And you don't have to be a giant. That's one of the things that I love about conferences is you go out and you confer and you talk to people. And you may feel small, but you could be a giant to somebody else. Thank you. All right. I think I saved some time for questions. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we're waiting for the questions. You will see them in just a few seconds. There.
Yay. I'll have to look up.
It's down there.
There we go.
Yeah.
Can I talk more about how the mob test design sessions were done? Yeah, they were fabulous. So it was actually a small team of end-to-end testers I had. So there was only 5 of us there at the time when we first started this out. So we usually limited the mob test sessions to, I would say, 5 to 7 people. I would have 3 of my end-to-end testers there. I had 1 developer and 1 BA there. And we would run 90-minute sessions. And we would pick 1 feature or 1 section of whatever product experience that we were working on. So let's say our guest check-in for pages for our property management system. So we would sit for 90 minutes, and we used the San Francisco Depot. We had 1 driver at the computer, and everybody else would start talking about, okay, let's look at the integrations. Okay, so it needs to integrate with our database. It needs to integrate with identity service. This was all run off of, the whole platform was run off about 232 different microservices. So we leveraged the developer to say, yep, you know, these are the microservices that were involved, and we had 1 person at the whiteboard that was jotting down ideas and starting to actually draw out our mind map. I do have pictures of how the whiteboarding things and stuff like that went, so it was actually pretty cool. It really did foster communication, and then every 2 minutes we would rotate who was at the whiteboard, who was at the computer, and who was in the panel discussing their different test ideas and things like that. How to make sure these practices stick. So I actually have moved on from Carnival Corporation. I'm now with Ultimate Software, and through this, I developed some lifelong friends. You know, I still talk to my testers. I still talk to a lot of them, and one of the big things on this was it was a cultural shift. And the practices are still sticking. It's almost 3 months later, and they're still doing their mob test designs. They're still doing all their test reports, things like that, because they were happy. When you find something you love and that you're passionate about, you tend to continue to do it. So they found out it was working for them. I know they've done a few tweaks to the process to make sure it works even better for the team or as the product evolves, but for the most part, the underlying thoughts and processes for it have stuck. So what different tools did you use while performing mob testing? This was fabulous. So we used a whiteboard and markers, and we used a computer, and then we used a kitchen timer. And that's really what we used. Those were the only things that we used to go through and do the mob testing. It was actually pretty easy. It was pretty low tech, and we were able to get a lot accomplished. I should say, we used those for the mob testing sessions. Once we were done, we always took a picture of that whiteboard, and then we imported the information into Lucidchart to make it an actual readable, pretty mind map. All right. How do you standardize how tests are prioritized? Yes, so different testers do view the severity of an issue quite differently, which is why we usually would go to our business. We had our ideas. What we would do is testers would go through, and amongst themselves, we would talk, communicate as a group, figure out where our priorities lied with testing, and then we'd have a quick meeting with our business analyst to say, this is what we think, what do you think? And sometimes things would get shifted around, especially in the beginning, as we were learning the different products, as we were fostering that communication. It took a little while for my testers that had different priorities in the business to realize, okay, you know, we really need the business endpoint. We need to know how our users are using this and leverage that information. So I have about 10 seconds left. So quickly, how do you motivate your team to achieve better results if they lose their motivation? I have them go do something else. That's the biggest way to help motivate people, is I break them out of the monotony that they're in, either look at a different product, or we'll do an offsite or anything like that to really kind of get that energy up and going again. So I think is that all the time I have? Oh, I still have time. This is more time for questions.
Yeah, we still have time for the questions.
Oh,
you have plenty
fabulous.
of time. Yeah.
I thought that time included questions too, so I was like rushing through. I'll keep going with questions then. All right. Isn't spoon-feeding managers color-coded decision tables counterproductive? So possibly in your organization. Now, this was a small group, so I reported directly to my VP. And my VP, let me tell you, did not have time to go through and read a big document, test report, things like that. He needed to look at something visual. You can process visual things a lot faster than you can process written words. So it allowed him to make quick business decisions based on color coding. Now, that's why we also had the in-depth Excel spreadsheet that people who needed more information could go to. How to convince managers to shorten meetings if they live for them. I actually don't know any managers that live for meetings. So I would say for this, it's talking to them and telling them the value of, like, look at how much more things you can get done. And if you're living for meetings, how can I leverage you in a different capacity? How much effort did it take to convince everybody that these changes were important and useful? That was a hard one. So when I initially came in, it took me probably 6 months, 3 to 6 months to convince everybody that changes were important and useful. And what I needed to do is I found a champion. I had a team that was living and being judged off of the number of test cases that they were having, and they had a very mindset of, well, this is how I get paid. This is what I get paid for. And I said, no, actually, you don't get paid for the number of test cases. And if that's all you're producing and the quality goes down, who do you think is going to get blamed first? The tester always gets blamed first. So it doesn't matter how many number of test cases you perform. If quality is going down, they're going to find somebody else. To them, that means, to leadership, that means you're not doing your job. So let's figure out how to tell your testing story in a way that's meaningful to them so they can see value in what you're doing and make it fun for you. And as soon as you said, wow, I'm going to feel valued and have fun, that started to really change people's minds. They were skeptical at first. They didn't think it was possible. But then after a couple iterations, everybody was like, this is amazing. I get to think. This is great. How was the testing at the IoT part? Any kind of fun with hardware testing to inspire others? So yes, the IoT part. I have actually a really fun story about this too. So we had the little device medallion, and they're all personalized. So we have a laser engraver that personalizes the metal ring that's around the medallion. So my testers got very comfortable. I got very comfortable about going up to a laser engraver and putting in the information and having it personalized with my test user. What I didn't understand one day is that they had decided to experiment and change from metal to plastic. Do you know what happens when you put a plastic thing in a laser metal engraver? Fire. There was a lot of smoke, there was a lot of fire. So the inspiration with that is, I didn't get fired. Nobody lost their job over this. But it really showed a pain point that we didn't know. There's a lack of communication here. Maybe we should start telling each other when we're going to change materials, that software testing isn't necessarily always about testing the software. If you expect me to engrave a medallion, I'm going to expect it to be the same thing unless you tell me otherwise. Oh, okay. Then at what stage of testing did you use for mob sessions? So we used it actually in a couple of places. We did mob session for test design, and we did it right at the beginning. So as soon as I heard any sort of inkling of a new feature coming out, of new requirements coming out, things like that, I pulled the BA involved, and I said, okay, first of all, do you even know that this is coming out? Because creative leadership tends to be like, I want you to do this, and start talking to people, and we're lacking that. So I got my BAs involved, and we did the test design, broke it out, but then we also did session-based exploratory testing using mob testing as well. So we used it in a couple different capacities, and that was actually one of the ways I was able to break out some of the monotony of the testing was to do mob testing sessions. All right, now I'm really, really done. So thank you so much for your time,